What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and today we're going to talk through my top 10 fantasy football lessons learned from week 15 as we look forward to the rest of the fantasy football playoffs. We're going to talk through usage trends, data, nuggets, and just kind of put a bow on what was week 15, even though we have a couple of games happening tonight. As always, if you enjoy, leave a like, subscribe. Let's get right into the world-famous rookie receiver report, as always, sponsored by the beautiful people over at Underdog Fantasy. Make sure you check them out. Use promo code RON. They'll match your first deposit up to $1,000. I'll have links to that in the description and the comment section down below. And you can see here, you get a free pick in the pick'em lobby, 0.5 total yards higher for Kirk Cousins. You can go all throughout the pick'em, go higher or lower on their projections for NFL. They got college in there. They got NBA. They have all of that good stuff. You can find that in the description and the comment section down below. And I will say, let me know if you guys are sweating out any of your best ball teams. We got, it wasn't the best year for me in terms of from an advancement rate standpoint, but we do have a couple of BBMs right now just barely hanging on. Or this one's barely hanging on, 163 here. Josh Allen, JT, James Cook. We did get the Amon-Ra game, but this is my prized possession. This one right here was my leading scorer throughout the entire season. It put up 204 points with some games to go. A Kyler Goff, Gibbs, James Cook, Amon-Ra St. Brown, T. Higgins, Brian Thomas, Rashad Bateman, George Kittle, Geno Smith team here with a lot of like Detroit, Arizona, NFC West correlation. We'll see. Of course, we'd love this to be Chase Brown and not Zach Moss, but we'll see what happens. Good luck to all of you guys. Best ball can be a absolute gauntlet to get to the end. So I hope that all of your teams are doing well. Again, shout out to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring the rookie receiver report. Now, as always, this is going to be our first takeaway where we just kind of look at what happened with all the rookies. And up top, Malik Nabers finally bounces back. He did it with Tommy DeVito, Tim Boyle, and I can't stress enough how impressive it is what Malik Nabers is doing here. He is out here as the wide receiver 6 in points per game among all rookie wide receivers since Randy Moss in 1998. Now, of course, we have the route percentages here. That is just what percentage of the time is your player running a route on that passing play. Are they just a starter on the passing offense? Targets per out run, your volume. Anything over 25% is elite. Anything over 20% is good. Your yards per out run, so your efficiency per route, anything over 2 is good. First downs per out run, we want something over 10%. That is just, are you not only making big plays and being efficient, but are you important to your offense and moving the chains? And then PFF grade. How do you look on film? Anything over 80 has been a huge indicator for rookie receivers. And as you can see with Malik Nabers, his rookie season through 12 games stacks up with Justin Jefferson at number 7, Michael Thomas at number 8, you have Puka Nacua at number 5, you have Jamar Chase at number 3. He's in that 17 points per game of like true special difference makers. And remember, Jamar Chase as a rookie had Joe Burrow. Puka Nacua as a rookie had Matthew Stafford. Justin Jefferson as a rookie had Kirk Cousins when he was like very good. Michael Thomas, I believe, had Drew Brees. You can go up and down the list. Malik Nabers has had a combination of Daniel Jones, Tommy DeVito, Drew Lock, and Tim Boyle, and he's at 17.2 points per game. So just keep that in mind when we talk about Malik Nabers' big picture. And on top of that, when you just talk about both of the LSU receivers, and I will recap, Malik Nabers had 14 targets, 10 catches, 82 yards, and a touchdown. You hate to see 82 yards on 14 targets, but it's just what it's been with this receiver room, or with this quarterback room. Thankfully, he scored a touchdown. Huge bounce back for him. And then also Brian Thomas Jr., man. These LSU receivers, it's, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but it's looking like a Chase Jefferson situation where both of these guys are just going to be absolute monsters moving forward. Brian Thomas Jr., again, both of these guys are at the top here in terms of like producing, in terms of PFF grade, in terms of yards per route, or, the per route metrics as a whole, where Malik Nabers is at 28.7% targets per out run, Brian Thomas Jr. 2.26 yards per out run, and they're both doing these amazing things with bad quarterbacks, right? Yesterday, Malik Nabers had like Tim Boyle, and then Brian Thomas Jr. with Mac Jones had 14 targets as well, 10 catches, 105 yards, 2 touchdowns, 30-plus point game. Just amazing stuff from both of these receivers. They're going to be big players down the stretch for these fantasy playoffs, and both guys that are already in the top 10 for dynasty wide receivers. Now, moving on from that, we have Ladd McConkey, who actually got a minus 1.4. This whole column here is your difference between your PFF grade last week and your PFF grade this week. Ladd McConkey did have 2 drops in this game, like uncharacteristic drops. That's probably what bumped him down. But still a fine 7 targets, 5 catches, 58 yards, and a touchdown in a game where he came back from injury, and a game where the Chargers just didn't look all that great against the Buccaneers. Again, we didn't talk about Brock Bowers because he's going to be playing tonight. Marvin Harrison Jr., more of the same here. Targets per out run is great. He's commanding volume. We'd like to see that, right? His targets per out run, 21.2%. That's a great number. He's just not efficient with it, which is bad. 1.62 yards per out run in this sea of guys over 2 or like over 1.9. These are concerning. He is not converting at a high rate on his targets. He is getting open, which is good. He's commanding volume, which is good. But in terms of that turning into production, it's not great. And for redraft, he's been brutal because the name value, hoping as a rookie he's going to perform in the back half of the season. You've been plugging him in your lineup, and he's been giving you duds. So moving forward, you treat him as like a wide receiver 3. His final 2 games, I mean, he has a get-right spot against Carolina next week, a get-right spot against LA, 2 teams that should not be like the greatest pass defenses of all time, but it just hasn't really seemed to matter for Marvin Harrison Jr. He had 6 targets in this game, just 2 catches and 32 yards. That's kind of been his issue, is he hasn't been over a 50% catch rate, and that's something that I never really look at. But catch rate is, of course, a function of yards per out run. If you're not catching a lot of your targets and you're not getting a lot of yards on your targets, which means you're not getting a lot of yards on your per route run, he hasn't been over 50% catch rate since week 10, and that's just your percentage of catches on your target. So there's something there. It's just, I don't know if him and Kyler just aren't clicking. It's sad to see, but again, long-term view, zoom out of 2024, when we look at him as a dynasty asset, I'm not fully panicking. These numbers aren't face planner numbers. They're not, sound the alarm numbers on him for being like a wide receiver 1 in fantasy in the future. But for 2024, when he had massive generational expectations, he's clearly a tier below Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. at this current standpoint. We'll talk about Leggett and Coker. Xavier Leggett, sadly, he left with an injury in this game, but Coker had a monster game. He had 6 targets, 4 catches, 110 yards, a touchdown. He could be the late season savior. If Leggett misses a extended amount of time, and we see Bryce Young still having some kind of like a functioning offense here, Coker becomes very interesting. He is now at over 2 yards per out run. He's over 75 PFF grade. 17.7% targets per out run is great. And he ran the second most routes behind Adam Thielen. He actually ran more routes than David Moore, which is something we've been watching where Carolina has loved giving David Moore a lot of these routes. That did not happen in this game. Now, after that, Keon Coleman comes back from injury. We'll talk about him. He gets 2 targets, 1 catch for 64 yards. So he plays 56% of the routes. He's not a focal point of this offense, but he did make a big play when called upon. That's exciting, but until this route number gets to like 80% plus or 90% plus, he's not really startable. And you're seeing with the Bills right now, they threw for like over 300 yards, but they spread it around so thin that no one is really startable. I think that their leading receiver was Ty Johnson in this game against the Lions. And then we have Xavier Worthy. And I will, 4 or 5 weeks ago, I waved the white flag on Xavier Worthy, saying that this is a face planner. This is maybe Sky Moore 2.0. He hasn't, his yards per run is still 1.12, like not great at all, but he's showing signs of life. They're involving him a lot more in the offense, 67% up to 81% of the routes to 86% of the routes. And in this game, he had 11 targets, which was a season high, 19.6 PPR points, his highest since week 1. And then he also got a manufactured rush near the goal line in for a touchdown. So they're using him a lot. That's exciting. He did increase his PFF grade by 1.8, but we now have Patrick Mahomes potentially out for who knows how long. So something interesting to definitely look at with Xavier Worthy. I will say he's definitely looking up from a dynasty perspective, but for redraft, if Mahomes isn't around, then Worthy's not really worth mentioning. We'll also talk about some other guys. We have Jalen McMillan, who is really turning things up here, 3.4 in terms of his changed PFF grade here. He's been the wide receiver 9 over the last 2 weeks. He had 6 targets, 5 catches, 75 yards, and a touchdown in this game versus the Los Angeles Chargers. I mean, the per out stuff, brutal the entire season, but the last couple of weeks, he's figuring it out a little bit here. Then we have A.D. Mitchell. I did want to touch on him. I mean, man, what a brutal game. He throws a pick 6 in a trick on a trick play. He gets 4 targets, 0 catches, Brutal game. I mean, I still like him just because he commands targets, he gets open, but he is a long way to go as a pro, and that's probably not going to be a great look to Steichen and the coaches there when you throw a pick six and you don't convert on some targets. It's rough. I will say some of the 4 targets, maybe he didn't catch all of them because Richardson definitely wasn't on his game yesterday. I will say Luke McCaffrey, you can call him dead at this point. In a game with no Noah Brown where somebody was supposed to step up, I believe it was Olamide Zaccheaus who kind of stepped up in routes. Luke McCaffrey has been a non-factor despite some opportunity. Same thing goes with Ben Sinan. This one's really disheartening. Somebody that I liked a lot in Dynasty. I mean, he still has some pathway to be like a Trey McBride where he was like a 0 early on and then a year 2 or 3 breakout. But it's not looking great. In a game without Zach Ertz, all he gave you is 1 target. Or no, Zach Ertz gets hurt mid-game. He runs 54% of the routes. I believe that's a season high, and he gives you 1 target. And now his per route stats, I mean, they are setting the bar for what a terrible receiving season looks like. 2% of his routes turn into first downs, 0.28 yards per out run, 5% of his routes are a target. Not good. Not good. Ben Sinan, I mean, he's not droppable in Dynasty, but he is no longer like a priority stash. And then we can also talk about Malik Washington. He comes in here late in this game, or not late in this game, but Jalen Waddle gets banged up early. Malik Washington gets 70% of the routes. And despite not having great per route data the entire season, he increases his PFF grade by 3.7, and he gives you 6 targets, 5 catches, 52 yards. Something to definitely keep an eye on in an offense where they are very particular with where they give those targets in a lot of screen game and a lot of manufactured touches. Him getting 6 opportunities in relief of Jalen Waddle as a 5th-round rookie, that is something to keep an eye on. And then we'll talk about I wrote down Devontae Walker. I imagine some of you guys saw him score and wanted me to talk about him. He's ran 3 total routes on the entire year, one of those being a touchdown yesterday in a blowout versus the Giants. So nothing really to see with Devontae Walker. Now, our second takeaway that we will talk about here is my Jets. This always happens. My second takeaway, I have it written down, is Aaron Rodgers to Davante Adams glory days and some Jaguars notes. This always happens. It's too little too late. The Jets are already mathematically eliminated. And of course, this is when Davante drops a 40 bomb in the fantasy playoffs. I imagine that this swung a lot of matchups in the first round of the playoffs. He gave the Jaguars 12 targets, 9 catches, 198 yards, 2 touchdowns. It looked like vintage Rodgers to Davante Adams. Since the trade, I think is something good to look at here, as I try and ground myself back in what actually matters here, is Davante Adams has had a lot more targets than Garrett Wilson since getting traded in Week 7 to the Jets and playing, in that Steelers game. 81 targets, 49 catches, 651 yards, 5 touchdowns for 18.3 points per game as the wide receiver 7. Garrett Wilson has been behind that. Now, if you look at the targets, he's turned 67 targets into 6 less catches. So Garrett Wilson's been much more efficient than Davante Adams. Davante Adams has been getting more of the targets. It's kind of buddy ball. You had a clip, even though Garrett Wilson scored a touchdown in this game, where Garrett Wilson was mad on the sideline, saying something along the lines of, if it's one-on-one, throw the fade. Pretty much my point here is that Davante Adams should be ranked ahead of Garrett Wilson moving forward, and that they're both probably top 24 options as it stands here today. We also have Rodgers scrambling more. He hit 300 plus yards for the first time last week since 2021. He hit 3 passing touchdowns yesterday, 289 passing yards, and he had 45 rushing yards. He hasn't hit 45 or more rushing yards since 2019. Maybe, I don't know. I'm curious what you guys think. He's very old, but maybe there's some bounce back here where it takes some time to recover from an Achilles tear, and maybe now he's playing some of his best ball down the stretch because of that, or maybe it's because he played the Jaguars defense today. Yesterday he played the Dolphins defense last week, who isn't amazing, but they're okay. I don't know. We'll see if any of this sticks. I think if you want to talk big picture, I really do think Aaron Rodgers is playing his way into the Jets' starting job next year, running it back with Davante Adams. So in case if you care about that kind of thing, whether that's dynasty or just overall football storylines. Now, the backfield split in New York. We had Braylon Allen leave this game with an injury. Breece Hall plays less than 50% of the snaps in this game. He gets bailed out on a touchdown if you started him in this game. Just 11 opportunities. Isaiah Davis had 6 opportunities. Braylon Allen, 2 opportunities. Of course, Braylon Allen got banged up. This is the Fantasy Life utilization report kind of showing the usage here. Brees had the most snaps, rush attempts, routes, targets per out run. He had the inside the 5 carry. He had the 2-minute drill snaps. You had Isaiah Davis as like the third down back. Across the board, not great. Brees is clearly banged up. They're kind of using him sparingly. Isaiah Davis fills in for Braylon Allen. It seemed like, honestly, I didn't check the exact logs of coming in and coming out, but it seemed like they wanted it to be a three-headed backfield sort of regardless here, if Davis is taking away some of the third down, long down, and distance snaps. But something to keep an eye on. I think Breece Hall is going to be a really rough start the rest of the way just because he's clearly banged up. Why they won't shut him down, or I don't know. I say that rhetorically knowing that he's an athlete and he wants to compete, so he's going to play if he can, but he is clearly, I don't know, there's something up. He's not himself. They're limiting him on a touch count, so you can really only expect like 10 to 15 Breece touches in a given week, so he's like a back-end RB2 moving forward, with Isaiah Davis being a really high-priority handcuff because if Braylon Allen is hurt, and Isaiah Davis is the only running back there, that becomes very interesting for fantasy football. Now, on the other side, I do want to highlight Brenton Strange, who's probably going to be a waiver wire player with Evan Ingram getting hurt. Brenton Strange was drafted in the 2nd round out of Penn State. Pretty decent athlete, 4.7 speed, 36-inch vertical, 9.09 relative athletic score. And he has now played in, weeks 2, 3, 4, 5, and 15. So 5-game sample without Evan Ingram. He's at 10.9 points per game, which would be the tight end 8 in 2024, ahead of Mark Andrews and Tucker Kraft. He had 12 targets versus the Jets in this game, 11 catches, 73 yards. He did very well. Something to definitely keep an eye on is Brenton Strange. And then this backfield continues to flip back and forth. Tank Bigsby had a fumble when we look at the utilization report from Fantasy Life here, where ETN had 52% of the snaps in week 13. Then Bigsby got the lead, plus 69% of the rush attempts in week 14. Then that flips back, where we see ETN at 70% of the snaps, Tank Bigsby at 29%. I do think that they punished him for fumbling. That gave 19 opportunities to ETN, 12 opportunities for Tank Bigsby. Neither of them, I don't think ETN really did all that great with 19 opportunities either. He had 12.5 PPR points. So this backfield, you're just sort of hoping for touches here, but after a week where it looked like Bigsby maybe there was a flippening, that has now been reverted back to normal. Another backfield we'll talk about here is going to be Tennessee. Pollard came into this game banged up, and then it was also a trailing game script where the Titans were playing catch-up versus the Bengals here. Spears outsnapped Pollard. That hasn't happened. I don't know if it's happened at any point this season. I do want to double-check that, but that was big. Again, I think game script played into it. I think that Pollard's injury played into it, but we still did see more opportunities for Pollard. Pollard had 17 opportunities to 11 for Spears, but that was still huge for Spears, who's very explosive. He scored... I want to say he scored 2 touchdowns as well. Yeah, he scored 27.2 PPR points on 11 opportunities. Spears looked very good. We'll see what that split looks like moving forward. And I think it was the first time that Tony Pollard got 0% of the targets in a game this year. Will Levis gets pulled in this game. Calvin Ridley gives you a dud in what should have been a smash matchup versus the Bengals. Tough scenes for that quarterback room. I wish I had something more positive to say about Ridley moving forward, but there is not really any silver linings. Then we have the Lions. We just have a lot to talk about. First up, I said the Lions defense might give a big playoff boost to their pass catchers. That's what I wrote down, but we have another layer of that where, yes, we look at EPA per play allowed. That's just contextualized yards and touchdowns. Weeks 1 through 13, they had the best defense in the NFL. The last 2 weeks, they have been 30th, and this is because they keep on bringing people off the street. You can see here, projected 2024 starting defense. Aiden Hutchinson's on IR. McNeil, he is now out for the season, I believe. Davenport, IR. You have a bunch of guys on that team. I think Carlton Davis is hurt. I think Anzalone might have an issue. They're bringing, I'm a Jets fan. They're bringing Jamal Adams off the street. They're bringing anybody that they can. They're bringing Zadarius Smith off the street, I believe was one of the names that they got. Their defense is pulled together by duct tape. And now to add on to that, we have David Montgomery hurt. So what I'm trying to say here is we have this perfectly set up here where there was an issue for Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown this season where this team just didn't need to pass the ball a ton. They were winning games by 40. Their defense is playing great. Their run game was amazing. And now we have David Montgomery out for the season. So that's going to take emphasis away from the run game, more towards the passing game, and then with the defense being worse, we're now going to see more shootouts, more games where they have to pass the ball, and that's massive for Amon-Ra St. Brown, that's massive for Laporta, that's massive for Jameson Williams, and Jahmyr Gibbs as well, getting the sole touches in this backfield. I think it's important to look at, we had Jared Goff give you a 40 bomb. He was your only hope of matching a Lamar or a Josh Allen performance this week. We got a 30 bomb from Amon-Ra St. Brown, 25 plus for Gibbs, and quietly, over the last 3 weeks, Sam Laporta has been the tight end 3 in points scored at the tight end position. So I think moving forward, if you have any of these guys on this screenshot here, I would feel very good moving into the fantasy playoffs. Then our fifth takeaway is Kendre Miller has league-winning upside if Alvin Kamara misses time here. We have from J.J. Zacharyson, Alvin Kamara suffered a groin injury against the Commanders, and Kendre Miller led the backfield in snaps as a result. He outsnapped Jamal Williams 26-6 while running 11 more routes per PFF. And then Jeff Mueller adds in here. He is a injury analyst over with 4 for 4, I believe. And he said Kendre Miller has the chance to be a league winner in Week 16. Alvin Kamara will likely have a difficult time playing through the groin injury given his skill set and movement tendencies. So we could see a spot where, 26-6 is what, like 26 divided by like 30. It's a massive opportunity share is what Kendre Miller got in terms of the split between him and Jamal Williams, and that would be huge. He had 10 opportunities this week. He had like 10 opportunities in this past week in Week 14, and this could be a guy who's definitely on waivers or sort of rotting away on best ball rosters right now. He gets Green Bay next week and then Las Vegas. He should get, if truly Kamara is inactive, we should see Kendre Miller flirt with about 20 opportunities, which would be huge in the fantasy playoffs. Then our sixth takeaway is the Eagles' squeaky wheel game. We finally got it. Both A.J. Brown and Davante Smith get over 100 receiving yards, a touchdown. They both get home on the day, despite 42 rush attempts. They absolutely dominated the Steelers here. I know the score was like close for a second here, but 77 plays. I want to say the Steelers only had like 40-something. I think they had like 20-plus first downs. They were moving the chains. They were possessing the ball, kind of like really enforcing their will. Again, it wasn't even like they ratcheted up the passing volume because they did with 32 pass attempts, but 42 carries. So they're still sitting like the 40% in terms of pass rate in this game. They just had the ball a lot. And then they also made sure, 11, 12, so what's that? 23 targets of 31 went to Davante Smith and A.J. Brown, which is good. If that's a point of emphasis moving forward where if we're going to pass the ball, it's going to be one of these two, that is absolutely massive. I will say, though, A.J. Brown got a hip drop tackle in this game, which is really funny. I didn't like the rule to begin with, but to impose the rule and then never enforce it outside of, like, in retrospect with fines, it is weird. But he clearly, hip drop tackle happened to A.J. Brown. He looks banged up. We'll see what his availability is like moving forward. And if he can't go, then Davante Smith becomes, like, league-winning number one wide receiver for this offense. And, of course, a Saquon Barkley dud. I would imagine a lot of Saquon teams have buys. Hopefully, if they don't, they kind of got railroaded here. 19 carries for 65 yards, no touchdowns. He gave you 2 catches, 9 yards. And I will say this is a good reminder of just how much variance there is in fantasy football. Like, the playoffs are absolutely brutal. Like, if you found yourself with a Saquon team and you got knocked out in this round, like, it sucks, but it is just the game we play. I think that this illustrated it well from Garrett Price over at Dynasty Price. In Week 15, the following lineup would have made the playoffs in almost every league. In Week 15, it had 48.6 points. Purdy, Saquon, Derrick Henry, Cooper Kupp, Metcalf, Jawan Jennings, Kelsey, Najee Harris, Waddle, and Tua in the super flex. Just brutal day we'll talk about it later. Brutal day for the running backs. Brutal day for a lot of early round picks. Of course, with like the Cup Zero, the San Fran and Rams games, like completely nuked some people in the fantasy playoffs. So there was, when we're talking about like a single game sample, it gets really hairy in fantasy football. Our seventh takeaway is the Chiefs backfield split, something we've been keeping an eye on. Pacheco has been kind of ascending. That did not continue this week. This is from the Fantasy Life Utilization Report. You can see Pacheco goes from 33% of the snaps in his first game back to 48%, down to 37% in this game. Kareem Hunt kind of bounced back up to 37% after being a little bit lower in 14. Samaje Perine still being very annoying, about 30% of the routes, 25% of the snaps. So we have like a three-way backfield split. Mahomes potentially out Wentz potentially in. It's just not good vibes for Pacheco, and if you were leaning on Hunt or Pacheco in the fantasy playoffs, just absolutely brutal. Pacheco now has 3 games back from his injury. He's yet to hit 10 or more PPR points. He had 14 opportunities in this game, which is good, but again, he didn't really produce on those. You have Kareem Hunt, had 15 opportunities, and you had 2 opportunities for P. Ryan. P. Ryan's just out there running like empty calorie snaps and routes. I do want to make sure, did Kareem Hunt give you anything in fantasy? I don't think he did. Yeah, geez. So we're talking, that's 29 combined opportunities for Pacheco and Hunt gives you 5.9, and Pacheco gave you, I want to say, 8? Pacheco gave you 5.7. So we're talking like just over 10 PPR points on 29 running back opportunities for the two of them. Just not great. You're not going to see anything great until one of them really comes out ahead and we start to get like a 20 touch per game running back. But as of now, they are both cannibalizing each other. I do know the story of the night. Geno Smith goes down, and this is really bad for the Seattle pass catchers because Seattle has some issues. New OC Ryan Grubb, he comes in here. I had high expectations. He's been okay. Their offensive line has been awful. And Geno Smith has been playing at a really high level, just that this offensive line has been so bad that like he's not at MVP levels or anything crazy, but he's been playing high-level football. Sam Howell comes in and has a brutal day. You can see from Benjamin Solak here, hold on, this is the stat. 19 dropbacks and only 5 completed passes. It's only happened 20 times in the last 25 seasons. And this is the list. You get like Sam Howell, then Darnold, then Malik Willis, then old Cam Newton, Jalen Hurts, Nathan Peterman. I guess Peyton Manning had one of those as well. That's like an old Peyton Manning. Chad Henne, Curtis Painter. Yeah, just not a great. It was just a really tough game, right? 19 dropbacks, 5 completed passes. He's getting sacked. And now next week, if Geno Smith can't go, they play against the Vikings, who has just been giving fits to every quarterback out there. I want to say that there was like a direct quote from Brock Purdy after the game, like the scheme is crazy or whatever he said. So that's going to be absolutely brutal. Now, I don't expect him to have, he had like a 30% completion percentage moving forward, but it's not going to be great. I will say, I think that JSN is the only pass catcher that makes it out alive with Sam Howell. 3 of the 5 completions for Sam Howell went to JSN. None of them went to Metcalf. JSN still got out of here with 12 targets, 10 catches, 83 yards. So he still did absolutely fine for you in fantasy football. Then our 9th and 10th takeaways are more big picture because, it's week 15. It's fantasy playoffs. There's not a new stat to glean out of every single game and every single matchup. We still do have 2 going on tonight. So I want to talk about some bigger picture stuff as we get into the playoffs and just kind of like what the story of the season will be. And I think that first up is just that elite quarterback. And this isn't even, I was very neutral on both. I just felt, if you can get one or the other, why not? But very clearly, elite quarterback has just absolutely crushed elite tight end. Or if we look here at both, this is just ESPN, me sorting by projection with the tight ends. And of course, you have McBride, who gives you, this is half PPR, he gives you, like 13. He's not going to win you your matchup. Kittle duds with 8, Kittle gives you fine with 8.1. Kelsey duds at 4.7. Laporta finally comes through a little bit, but he can't even give you 15. Andrews 9.4. We're outscoring the elite tight ends with Geno Smith at 15.3. Kincaid gives you 7.3. So it's just been brutal. Bowers would go off tonight for like 20 plus, or Hawkinson could do the same. But just as a whole, Bowers wasn't drafted as an elite tight end. Bowers you got late, like round 9. Hawkinson you got late as well. All the guys you drafted early between, I mean we. McBride has been good, but he hasn't really separated as like this elite tight end, like massive asset. Kelsey's been okay. I'm trying to think of like the guys you drafted early. Laporta's been bad. Kincaid's been bad. It's just been a brutal year for elite tight end, and we might just be out of that era of like where Gronk and prime Kelsey were these guys that could pace with wide receivers in scoring. And meanwhile, we have these quarterbacks. If you look at the top 5 scoring quarterbacks on the week, you have Josh Allen there at 40 plus. Goff, of course, saves you and bails you out there, but Allen has done good on what you paid for. You paid for him high, and then he has given you 25 plus points per game this year as like a real advantage. Same thing with Lamar Jackson, 36.1 points this week. He has given you 25 plus on average the entire year. And then Jalen Hurts as well has done good on what you drafted him for. He gives you 28 points this week. Of course, Goff gave you a 40 bomb. That was your one last hope. Rodgers did well as okay as well, but even then, like streaming, you're just not matching that production. Like you can pray for a Goff, but he's not going to match over an entire season an Allen or a Lamar. You just pull up the, it's literally just going to be what? Allen, Lamar, Burrow, Hurts. There's no streamers there. But if you pull up the top 4 tight ends, it's going to, of course, be, Bowers will be up there, McBride will be up there, Kittle will be up there, but then Geno Smith will be right in the mix as somebody that, like, matched those guys on points per game over the entire year. So, elite quarterback, we'll see if this holds moving forward, but it's something to definitely remember, where elite quarterback was, by and large, a way more impactful strategy or just, like, component of a team, for just like overall making the playoffs, having a good team. If you've had Josh Allen the last 2 weeks, you probably won the last 2 weeks. So it's just been absolutely crazy there. And of course, like not all the elite quarterbacks hit. I think the only one who didn't would have been Mahomes. So what's it, like 75% hit rate on the top 4 quarterbacks, whereas with the tight ends, it was like 0 for 4. Or I guess it's like 1 for 4. If you can call McBride a hit if you'd like to. I guess you could call Kelsey a hit. But again, these guys aren't like huge difference makers for your fantasy team is what I'm trying to say here. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about, really just wanted to put at the end because I've already been straight up with you guys that this has been one of my worst seasons, right? Obviously, I wasn't in on Saquon. I wasn't on Derrick Henry, but it's a small takeaway that 0 RB does strike back here, just 0 RB components of like a hero RB or RB2 is doing well here. 0 RB strikes back where we look at the top running back scores this week. Now, of course, you have to get that 0 RB or hero RB team to the playoffs in the first place, which was a really tough task this year. If you didn't have Jamar Chase, that is just what it is at this point. Maybe you limped in, maybe you didn't, but crazy week where we see, in terms of the top scorers, Saquon duds, Derrick Henry duds, Mixon duds. You get James Conner at the top here. He was drafted, probably like 6th, 7th round. Jahmyr Gibbs at the top as well as someone that was actually drafted early. But then after that, you have Chase Brown, Tyjae Spears, Jerome Ford is up there, Justice Hill is up there, Rico Dowdle. I don't think any of the guys on this list besides Gibbs were like top 2-round picks at running back. So it was just interesting to see some of these guys pop off. I think somebody that could be a 0 RB league winner that I didn't mention earlier. Who did I mention earlier? Oh, yeah, like Isaiah Davis or something. It would be Jerome Ford. Nick Chubb broke his foot, I believe, and is out for the season. And Jerome Ford saw 83% of the snaps. And Jerome Ford's just been he's a baller every time the Browns give him the ball. They've just been very partial towards Nick Chubb. He had 7 carries, 84 yards, and a touchdown. He had 2 catches for 20 yards. And if he's the main back moving forward, he's definitely somebody you can start. So that is going to do it for us today. Again, the entire Top 10 Lessons Learned is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. Make sure you check them out. Use promo code RON when you deposit. They'll match your first deposit up to $1,000. You can get the link to that in the description and the comment section down below. I don't know why I can't speak today, but good luck to all your fantasy teams. Good luck to all your best ball teams. Hope you guys are winning in your first round. Maybe you had a bye. Let me know. How are your teams doing? Is there any, if you want to have a funeral for your team down below and just let me know, here's what my team looked like. She's not advancing. This is where, you can have the best team and all it takes is 1 week. It's the sobering part of fantasy football, but it is what makes it great. There's real stakes. It's not just highest score at the end of 17 weeks gets it all. There is this gauntlet aspect to it that, we are a glutton for that pain, but it makes it all so much more rewarding at the end. So, with all that being said, if you enjoy, leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, oh.